Welcome back to part 2 of the Sew Along With Me for the Caroline Crossbody bag. Today, like I mentioned yesterday, we will be making the zipper back pocket. To make the zipper pocket, you will need 2 of the C3 pieces. There should only be 2 of the same size in your kit, and the back zipper pocket zippers. Now, to tell which one is the right zipper, there's always 2 in your crossbody kit. This one is the longer one, which is for the back closure. You want to grab the shorter one, which is for the back zipper pocket. Take one of your C3 piece and set it aside along with the zippers. Now we have one C3 panel. What we're going to do is we're going to mark the top center point of this piece. Now, do you remember how to mark the top center points of your piece? If you do, leave me a comment down below. What is your preferred method? Do you like to use a pen, pencil, chalks, or do you like to cut just a little corner like I just did? Now, once you did that, you want to flip it over and make sure you're facing the wrong side of the piece. Also, again, a reminder, since we're marking the top center point, you want to make sure your fabric pattern is facing the right direction. So if you have a kit that has a directional fabric print, make sure the print is facing the right directions, where this will be the top of the bag and this will be the bottom of the bag. Once you have the mark point, take a ruler and you want to draw a horizontal line below this mark center point. Now the width of your horizontal line depending on the kits you have. So refer to your kit for the length of the horizontal line. For me, I'm doing about 2 inches below the mark center point. Not the mark center point here, but the mark center point along the edge. So, okay? If you have one of these quilt cutting mat, use it to your advantage. It's actually very beneficial for this steps. So what you do is you want to mark about 2 inches below the top center edge. I'm going to use a pen to mark this. It's on the back side of the fabric anyway, so it doesn't matter. Please refer to your sewing kit booklet for the right distance here and the horizontal line we're going to draw. You're going to make a horizontal line that's whatever distance your sewing kit booklet says to be at. Since I'm making the medium, I'm going to go 5 inch and mark it here so I know that stopped. I lay it perfectly at 2.5 and then, okay. It doesn't really matter if you have to be exact, but you do want to be straight. So that's why I says this cutting mat is very beneficial, because you want it to be straight. Now from the first line, you want to draw another line down, which is at 1/2 of an inch below the first line. So to do that, I'm just going to make a couple marking. And you want to draw the second horizontal line the same width as the first one. And then you gotta close that to form a rectangle. Just make sure your lines are straight. So once you have this, now what you're gonna do is draw a center line, which is at 1/4 of an inch below the first line, 1/2 of 1/2. So you gotta mark right here. Now, depending on your sew kit, the length to go in, it might be different for the middle line. So what I'm going to do is it's about 1/2 for me. Once you make that mark in the middle, you're going to form a V at the corner. This could be roughly, you don't really have to be exact. The reason why we have to draw this V is so that you do not have bunching here when you sew the zipper on. So just gonna make a rough V. Now, once you have that, you're gonna grab the exterior panel you made yesterday, and you're gonna mark a top center point here. Now, what you're going to do is you're gonna grab this panel and you're gonna place it on your exterior panel, right side together. See, right side together, aligning at the marked top center point. Like this. Now take this to the sewing machine and sew along the outer edge of this rectangle you just drawn. Try to align so that the needle sew along the line. One thing I forgot to mention is because I make these bags so often, I'm so used to having the piece perfectly aligned. But what I recommend you do is secure it in place after you align it along the top center points. I totally forgot about it, but please don't forget like how I just did, because if you don't clip it here, it will be harder for you to make sure when you sew it doesn't slip the fabric. So secure it in place. I'm just so used to making this bag so many times that I forgot about this part. And one other thing I will recommend you do is add a clip to the side here, just so that the fabric doesn't turn sideways when you sew around the edge of the rectangle. Do the same for the other side. And there you have it. Now you're really ready to sew along the outer edge of the rectangle. One thing I learned after making this bag so many times is to start at the top center points instead of the corner points here. And the reason for that is when you turn the corner later to finish this outer rectangle box, this corner, if you sew here, it'd be very hard to complete versus if you sew all around, you could turn and then the stitch will look more professional and more even. So always start at the top center point. Now, don't start sewing right away. Lower your needle and align it to make sure that the needle is aligned with the drawn line you just did. Okay. So I usually manually lower my needle in through and puncture the thread and maybe do like 1 stitches. If you have to go reverse, I will also do that a little manual, just because I want to have that perfect rectangle shapes. This is a very good practice if you are new to sewing and you want to get that perfect stitch along the drawn line. Okay, I think we're all ready to go. Now we're gonna sew around the whole rectangle. And as you get closer to the corner, try to go slower. And to get perfect to the corner of the rectangle, you could also manually lower the needle again. I just got perfectly in the corner, so it's fine. Now, once you get there at the corner, lower your needle down. Don't have your needle up. Have your needle down, lift your pressure foot, then churn the fabric. And that's how you get a perfect churn on the corner of your rectangle. And again, I always manually lower 1 or 2 stitches just because I am not that good at stopping the needle right at the edge. So I always cautious and go slow. And then I did the same thing. I repeat, I rotate to get the perfect corner. If you align it perfectly, when you sew to the top center point that you start from, it should just sew over that perfectly. Go slow as you get close because you don't want to have a staggering line. You want to have it aligned perfectly. So just try to eyeball and then kind of aim your fabric a little bit to get to the alignment. Mine just went perfectly in there. I don't always get the perfect rectangle edge when I first start, but over the years I learned a few tricks here and there, so hopefully that helps you. get that perfect edge. And if you don't, it's okay because we're gonna have the zipper cover it up anyway. So here's the outline. As you can see, if you go slow and steady, you'll get a perfect outline of a rectangle. Now what we're gonna do next is cut along the center line, stopping at the end of the V shape. In order to cut this very cleanly, if you have one of these seam ripper, I highly recommend what you do is you poke a hole through like that. Just make a little rip, small, big enough so you could fit a small scissors through. Once you make that hole, probably can't see it through the camera, I'm using a small scissor. This is my thread cutting scissors. But I learned that it works really well for this. So after I poke a hole with the seam rippers, small enough for this tip to fit through, I will stick this small scissors through the hole I created. You can see. And then I'm just gonna snip along the drawing center line. Now, if you use one of these big scissors from the beginning, it will be really hard to get through that little center mark line without having a big gap, which is why I find that the small scissor is very easy to use for this situations. Now we're gonna stop at this mark point, then we're gonna cut along the drawn V. Be careful not to cut through the sewing corner that you just sewed. Just stop at the corner. So I'm going to cut the V, but stop at the corner. Don't go through the fabric and cut through the sewing stitches you just did. Stop right there. See that? Okay. Do the same for the other side of the V. Then we're going to repeat on the same side. Try to cut as close to the corner as you can, but not cut through the stitch you just did, because we're going to turn it out. And if you don't cut this corner clean, it will be bunching here. Next, unclip any clips you have to hold the fabric together. Take this panel and flip it through that gap you just did. This is why I say it's very important you cut the corner close enough to turn so it's not bunching here, but not enough to cut through the thread that you just sewed. Once you pull the pocket lining through, you want to crease around the edge of the rectangle. Now for this part, I find that an iron works really great at flattening it, but if you do not have an iron, you could also use a creaser or something to crease along the edge. You could also clip the fabrics like this. When you are trying to align the lining to the exterior panel, try to kind of stretch it out and take time. Make it sure it's even. Don't rush through this because this is very crucial for how your zipper will look at the end. And you want a nice looking zipper, right? So take your time. The edges are perfectly aligned. So if you flip it over to the other side, you shouldn't be able to see the lining, but you should only be able to see the exterior panel from this side. But from the back side, you shouldn't be able to see the exterior fabric. Yes, dog, we understand. Now, I'm going to take this and iron because that's just how I like to do on my side. You could do the same, or you could just clip here. My iron is hot and ready to go, so I'm going to go ahead and iron this panel. Specifically, not the whole piece. I just want to get around the edge. Now this piece is ready for the zippers. For the zipper steps, you want to take your zipper and you notice how there is no end here. So if you pull this all the way off, it's going to come off and you got to put it back. So be careful not to do that when grabbing this piece. Now to prevent that from actually happening when you attach the zipper to the exterior panel, we're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch across both ends. Sew the zipper at 1/4 seam allowance. You can also move the slider back to make it easier, but try to hold the zipper teeth together when sewing across. And when you get to the zipper teeth, go slowly or manually move your turning wheels so that you don't accidentally break your needle. The zipper teeth is made of plastic, while the zipper slider is actually metal. So because the zipper teeth is plastic, the chance of you snapping your needle sewing over it is very small. But just in case, for extra safety, go slowly when you approach the zipper teeth and try to just go at a steady pace just to prevent your needle from snapping. Sliders are now secure in place, and you don't have to worry about having the slider accidentally fall off. We're good to go. Take the panel that you just made with the back zipper pocket lining, and we're gonna add the zipper to this gap right here. If you are a right-handed person like myself and you are facing the exterior of the bag, which is what I'm showing here, the zipper with the slider in a closed position, not open, in a closed position, should face this side. So this is how we're gonna put the zipper, and I'm just trying to temporarily show you. This is where the slider should be, in the closed position. If you're facing the pocket lining, this slider in a closed position will be facing right for right hand. And now do the opposite if you are left hand. The 2 point where you sew the line vertical across, you want it to be at the edge of the rectangle. See this rectangle size? You don't want that part where you just sew to be against it. You want to leave some seam allowance so that it's outside of the rectangle edge, okay? And this slider should be in between this hole. Now, the best way I have found how to secure this in place temporarily in order for you to sew is either with a sewing pin or sewing tapes. I don't like sewing pin myself. So for a while, what I was doing, because I didn't have sewing tape, was I would just hold it like this and make sure it's perfect, aligned the way I want. I would fold the edge in place like this to a point where the edge of the zipper is. See, I was just folding in place. And then I would clip it in place to hold it in place so that when I sew, I could remove it as I sew. Since I have sewing tape, I'll be using sewing tape. If you're using sewing tape, I suggest you do not use the sewing tape all the way. I just use a small piece in place because what I learned is if you have a lot of sewing tapes, sometimes your needle pick up the adhesive part from the tape and then it causes the needle to be sticky and it doesn't sew well when the needles is sticky. I'm going to do one on the top and one on the bottom. And one thing about sewing tape is it's really hard to peel off. Maybe I don't know the technique, but I have to lift it off to peel it off. Oh God, I peel off the whole tape with it. I really don't like using sewing tape, but I figured this is the best way you could use it. For those who use sewing tape, do you have any tips? And the only tricks I know is to use my fingernail. Now, when you place the sewing tapes, another tips I have is to try to go close to the edge. Because if you go too far down, it will show on your fabric. One quick check to make sure the zipper slider is in the right direction from my hand and that the zipper teeth is in the center part. Now, we got to take this to the sewing machine. We got to top stitch around the zippers, and I'll show you how to do that. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that if you have a zipper foot and you're not very experienced using this foot to get like a good seam allowance, you can switch to that zipper foot. It will give you a better view of where your stitches are and how close you are to the edge of the zipper. Now, I'm going to be sewing this at 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to start at the top center point of the rectangle. Since I'm planning to go around the rectangle and go back over some of the stitches here that I just made, I don't have to backstitch right now. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that you don't want the zipper too close to the edge of this rectangle, because if it's too close, then the slider doesn't fit. If you look at the slider here, you notice that the slider has a width, and if you make the gap for the zipper teeth too narrow, like if you put the fabric too narrow, what will happen is the slider cannot slide back and forth. So a little distance between the zipper teeth and the fabric, a little gap like this, is perfect. And try to go very slow so that you could get a perfect rectangle and that you don't have a needle break on you. Again, when you turn the corner, lower your needle halfway, lift up your foot pressure, then rotate your fabric. And go very slowly over the zipper teeth. Avoid breaking your needle on the zipper teeth. I felt a little pressure on my needle because I'm going over the zipper teeth, so as a precaution, I'm just manually turning the wheel. Once you get close to the slider, put your needle halfway into the fabric, lift up your foot pressure, and then slide the slider down, out of the way. You could try pulling the slider back and forth to make sure it runs smoothly, and if it doesn't, now is the time to correct it, seam rip, and then start over, and make sure you give enough gap for the slider to slide back and forth. Mine slide pretty easily, and there's no part that's stuck, so I'm good to go to the next steps. If you haven't already done so, mark the top center point on this panel as well so that we could properly align it with the already marked top center points on this panel. Again, make sure the fabric is facing the right directions. This is how you want the top to look, and this is how you want the bottom to look. Just make sure in case you have a directional fabric print. Once you've done that, place this lining right side on top of the right side of the other back pocket lining. Aligning at the marked top center point. Now for this, you want to align to only the lining, the other lining piece. You do not want to align with the exterior panel. So now I'm going to go around the edge and secure everything in place. If you have a hard time aligning this piece together, another thing you could try is mark the bottom center point of both the linings, and that way you could align the center point and use that to align the edge. Once you got all the edges aligned, now we're gonna sew around the whole rectangle. Make sure you don't sew the exterior panel to the lining. Just fold it over and sew only the lining together. To sew the pocket lining together, you want to sew it at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Since we are sewing a very thin fabric, we should switch this needle. This will help the fabric from puckering. So I'm gonna go change the needle first. So here's the 8011 needle I'm going to change it to. I know it's a pain to always change your needle out between sewing, but I have read and learned that it's best practice for you, the fabric and the machine itself. All right, all good to go. Let's continue sewing. And when you get towards the center where you started, go slow so that you could overlap the thread instead of having it misaligned there. It is now complete. Zipper slides smoothly. And you can fit your hand here. Part 2 is now complete. I hope you have fun learning how to attach the zipper, as well as if you have any tips on how to make my zipper better or how I can stitch better here, leave me a comment down below. I always love to learn from others. Come and join me tomorrow on part 3 to learn how to make the inside slip pockets, zipper tabs, and back zippers. See you tomorrow!